tickled about the how interested you are in this topic. Since we've, as I told you last week, since we started this study in this short amount of time, I think I've heard 3 things on this topic on TV for sure, and then articles in the newspaper and all around. So it is an important topic, and it's one that we need to know about. Wherever you come down on the topic is going to be your decision, but we just want you to have the information you need. Tonight we have Becky visiting us. Raise your hand, Becky, today. And Becky was with us on Sunday morning, and she is from Mississippi, and I made a mistake. I introduced you to Liz, and they're planning a coup. So they're going to get a lot of Mississippi people, and who knows what will happen. And Chuck has a friend. Chuck, you want to introduce your friend?
Jim Raper. Jim was one of our original people.
Yeah. Okay, we're glad Jim's back with us tonight. And anybody else visiting? Okay. Well, it's a great group, and we're glad you're here. So I've had several people ask me about my medal. And I wanted to tell you that I was watching the Queen's funeral with a friend, and all those people had all those medals, and I was walking and praying, and I said, I need a medal. So she said, I have a medal. And she bought it at a flea market in England. And I said, you do? And so she gave it to me, and I want you to know what it says. It says, director, and then it says, I have to always look at it, I'm not sure what it says. I mean the exact wording, just a second. It says, comfort the bereaved and afflicted. Well, now, how about that? Yeah. So I said, well, then after I got one, this kind of human nature, I said, no, that's not really enough, because they had a bunch of them. So she said, well, I may have some more. So I asked her if I should wear this on the front of my robe, and she thought that I should, so you'll probably see it Sunday. So I'm very, very proud of my medal. We do have a good number of people on our prayer list. I hope that you'll take note of that. It went out with my letter, and I hope some of you have seen the video letter this week. It was a little different, and we've done it before, but we decided to do it again. And does anybody know what tomorrow is? Lord Texas Giving Day, and so I hope that you'll take an opportunity to give to Celebration Community Church. Our goal is $15,000. I know you, and I know we can meet that and go beyond. So we hope that you'll take time to give, and you might want to give on some of those boosted hours, 6 to 7, 11 to, when we will then go in a drawing for $2 extra $1,000. So there's some good incentives to give at different times during the day. So I hope you'll remember. What I was going to say as well is that we have lots of people on our prayer list, some with surgery, and I am sorry, my brother-in-law has been on our prayer list, and he died yesterday, and it is a great loss to our family, and I appreciate your prayers for all of us. My brother-in-law was he started dating my sister when I was 9 years old. So he has been a brother to me in every way possible. So, but there are others on our list as well that need our prayers and need our presence and help. So I hope we'll always be faithful to be there for each other. So let's get started. Last week was a little bit of a chaotic presentation because we moved and then we had to quit early and all that. So at the end of last week, we looked at the clip with, and I forgot their names, Dr.
Albert Whitehead,
and Perry, and then Perry, the other guy's last name was Perry. And
Andrew Whitehead, I'm sorry.
Andrew Whitehead, and then I think the person that wrote with him, his last name is Perry. So anyway, we listened to that clip, and he talked about Christian nationalism and how it's seeking to merge Christian and American identities, which then distorts both of those, distorts the Christian faith and then distorts America's constitutional democracy. And he said, Christian nationalism is a framework of thinking that demands Christianity be privileged by the state and implies that to be a good American, one must be a Christian. And so that is something that was kind of his definition and how he talks about Christian nationalism. And we know that America is a very different place than it was in the 50s and 60s, and we talked about that some last week, about ways that you grew up with blending those two, you know, God and country, it was the same thing, right? You talked about one, you talked about the other. And so we talked about, and I think you mentioned the way that how our families, we were taught that in our homes. And if you remember, a lot of you probably went to church where up at the front there was a Christian flag and an American flag, right? And I've had people ask me, why don't we have an American flag in the church? And I said, because we believe in separation of church and state. And that is, that's for another place. It doesn't mean we're not patriotic, but not for the church. So anyway, how, some of you mentioned some of these ways last week, but anybody over the week, you may have thought about this some, and how would a group of people fuse or merge their Christian and their American identities? How would they try to put them together so they were the same thing? Some of you mentioned those, a few of those ways. Anybody else thought of something that you grew up with? Yes, Gary?
In 1954, our coin and our money and the motto of the United States changed to "In God We Trust," and it was added to the Pledge of Allegiance. It was added to our coins, and it was added to, but only since 1954.
Right. Yeah, you're right. Gary's mentioning in 1954. So "In God We Trust" on our coins and in the pledge didn't start back in the 1800s. It started in 1954, and so that was a way of merging both of those. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't be loyal to both of them. It just means they each have their place, and we don't, you know, about merging them. Anybody else? Something you've thought of that, yes, yeah, Ed?
We almost have a litmus test for somebody who's running for president. If they don't attend a Christian church, they have, far less chance of getting elected. And that was even true before Kennedy was elected. We haven't even had a Catholic.
But when Kennedy, that was a big deal because, you know, people said the Catholic Church they're going to take over the country and they're going to be running the country,
Listen to the
right?
Pope, yeah.
I'm sorry?
You're gonna listen to
Listen
the
to the Pope and all those kinds of things. And so that was a real big shift. And the interesting thing is, a lot of people in our country are Catholic. I mean, we have a large Catholic population. So, but yet, it was a big change. Anybody else? Something that comes to mind? Julia?
On the back of your property tax statement, the envelope says "In God We Trust."
Oh, really? Is that new? She said on the back of the property tax statement envelope, it says "In God We Trust." And
That's in Tarrant County.
in Tarrant County, yeah. Yes.
Do they still have people swear over the Bible in the courts to tell
Yes.
the truth and stuff?
Yeah, that's right. We use the Bible for people to make, the president does that when they're sworn in on the inauguration day. And, yes.
Don't they even have, here in Texas, where every school now has to have prominently displayed a sign that says "In God We Trust" if it's
Yes.
donated to the school?
I think that did pass, that every school in Texas has to have prominently displayed in the classroom "In God We Trust." And so that's that same kind of idea that we're talking about, because our Constitution guarantees that you can believe as you choose. You can believe or choose not to believe. And so what we're doing is saying, this is the way you should believe. Ed?
The current move against, or move to pass anti-abortion legislation is predicated on the whole idea that abortion is murder, which is basically a fundamentalist Christian
Christian, that's right,
tenet. Jews do not believe that.
right.
Because they don't believe that life starts until the day you're born.
Right, and neither did, that's a new thing, even for the government here. We're talking about, she was saying even the opposition to abortion is a religious, it's based on a religious idea. And that, what I find interesting is if you go back and listen to read some historical documents, you'll find that that was not the opinion back about, 30 or 40 years ago, that was not the opinion. And so there are many of us that believe, I mean, I don't know that I would have ever had an abortion myself, but I think it's every woman's right to choose. So, but that's a whole nother argument, so let's don't I don't want to get you off on that. But that is one of the things. Yes, Randall?
Having a statue or monument of the Ten Commandments
Yes.
on civic buildings.
Yeah, so that's been a big one, is having the Ten Commandments or some religious monument on in a government building, or, one of the big court cases was in Maryland. I think there was some government owned by the government, and they put up a big sign, and it was, I can't remember if it was the Ten Commandments or what. And so somebody brought a lawsuit, and it went to the Supreme Court to say you can't do that on public property that's owned by the government. That you can do it on your church property, you can do it on, other places, but not on taxpayer paid for property. Okay, anybody else before we move on? I don't want to stifle any of your thoughts. So the statement that I just read suggests that Christian nationalism demands that Christianity be privileged by the state. So, and some of what you just said answers this question about ways that the state, the government at any level, could privilege Christianity as a religion. Can you think of other overt ways that we have experienced that, where Christianity is privileged by the state? So, in American prison system, the law says that all faiths have to be afforded the right to worship. So if I'm Native American, there should be provision for my worship, that we don't favor one or the other. We don't just provide a chaplain for the Christians, we have a chaplain for the Muslims and different faith groups. And so if you go to a federal prison, you'll see that, that they make opportunities for all religions to have a way to worship in the way they see fit. I don't know if I think I mentioned this too before, but in 1989-90, there was a big case from up in the Northwest, and it was about two men who were Native Americans, and part of their practice of faith is to smoke peyote, and they got fired from their job because they had, it's a drug, and had it in their when they did their drug test. And so they brought a suit saying that was their way of practicing their faith, and you can't force me not to do that. And so the court came back and said no, they could be fired. And so some faith groups then proposed the Freedom Restoration Act, which was to say that people's freedom, you have a right to your freedom, the government can't impinge on your freedom, whatever it is. The government can't create a religion, we can't, that's in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. So anyway, anybody else, something that comes to mind about the ways that one religion can be privileged over another?
Well, our holidays are national holidays.
Okay, that's a very good one, Nancy. National holidays.
Christmas, Easter.
And the post office is closed on Sunday. Why? Because Christians go to church on Sunday, right? And
Saturday was okay.
that's right. And so also, holidays that, for instance, we talked a little bit about that last week. We used to say Christmas holidays in school. We're gonna be out for the Christmas holidays. Now they say, winter break, or they try to be a little more inclusive in how they describe it. But that's exactly right. And so you think about people who are Jewish, or, you know, they don't observe Christmas. And I found out one year my family, our kids and Terry and I wanted to volunteer on Christmas. And so we called Cook Children's, and they said, oh no, there are no volunteer opportunities because all the Jews volunteer on Christmas. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool. But, so we couldn't even go. So, but yes, that's an excellent.
One that you probably wouldn't think about, but the Texas blue laws, where
Uh-huh.
you cannot buy alcohol on Sunday
Right,
until after 12 o'clock because church services are supposedly over.
that's right. Just talking about the blue laws that said
It's 10 now, okay.
that you
On the early
couldn't,
service.
you couldn't buy alcohol till after noon because that's when churches got out. So you didn't want to drink it during church, but they could get drunk after sometimes.
But they have recently changed that.
They
So now
have.
you can go to 10.
Okay.
Yeah, you can buy it at 10.
Oh, you can now buy it
I've
at
heard.
10.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So you go to the early service and then you
Oh,
get
you
the
heard
But
that.
that is a good point. That's been in place for years.
years.
Yeah.
They recently changed that.
Huh? Buy it the night before. Well,
It's
there are
only
always
beer and
ways
wine
to-
on Sunday, and it's not hard liquor.
Right.
What?
It's only beer and wine on Sunday, not hard liquor.
Right, you can't buy
Not
it.
that you would know.
They ship the stuff in, what can I say?
We all have friends that tell us about these things. Okay, so, there are definitely ways that one religion could be privileged. And you know, the interesting thing to me is about this is, what if one day we woke up and Christians weren't the dominant faith of the United States? Then what might happen? Then we might be realizing if we can do it for us, they can do it for them, right? And so then suddenly things change. So just imagine that, how it might change for Christians if suddenly Muslims or Jews or whoever were the dominant faith in the country, and they were making the laws and making the decisions.
So
Yeah.
wasn't there also shopping on Sundays, what is it called, blue law?
The blue
Yeah,
laws.
that's what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, they would have parts of the grocery store, ropes, you
Yeah.
couldn't even go in that part of the grocery store.
I used to work at the Forum 303 malls when I was in high school at the movie theater.
Uh-huh.
And the whole mall was closed, except for the movie theater.
Oh, except, it's okay to go to the movies.
Movies.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you're thinking in the right direction. These kinds of things are exactly what we're talking about. Okay, so, yes,
What you just said about, think about what would happen, I believe, you know, maybe this isn't true for everybody, but in my family growing up here in Logan, that was the hugest fear. I mean, that's part of what everybody's paranoid about.
That's right.
You know, that them people over there, just parties, whatever, put them over there. We don't want them coming in our country, so, you know, and yet the Christian people are supposed to be accepted with people coming from all over the world. So we have allowed other cultures to infiltrate only so much.
right,
But don't start taking over our religion thing,
right.
because, you know, we'll allow a few Jews over here, but we're not gonna let that be the main religion, you know, and so that's a huge fear of a lot of people.
Absolutely, you hit the nail on the head. That is one of the underlying fears. What I just said about what if this happened, that is one of the big fears. And I think that what has happened in our country is that fear has been unleashed even more so than it was. And now that is a huge, huge, huge thing. And it's led people to violence and reacting in ways that are pretty scary, I think. Yes, Julie?
It's not religion, but, I mean, changes have taken place that really have scared people.
Uh-huh,
Having the first black president,
uh-huh.
first woman
Last spring.
Vice President. And everybody survived.
Everybody's what?
Everybody survives.
Everybody, we made it through, didn't we?
You know, but it's sad that in this day and age, I mean, you know, it's the first one.
Yeah, it is very sad. She was saying that, for instance, a lot of people were upset about having a black president. And, you know, it's the kind of thing people don't want to say in public, but they will say, you know, under the dark of night, but they don't want to say it because they know they sound racist, which they are. And so, anyway, but you're exactly right. Okay. The second statement suggests that someone who embraces Christian nationalism believes, whether outrightly stated or not, and I've said this before, but that to be a good Christian, American, one must be a Christian. So, give some examples of people who are good Americans but not good Christians.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg, my idol, who is Jewish.
Yep.
That's exactly right. So very patriotic.
Should be part of
Believed in this country and loved this country. Yes, Jen?
Yeah, Jamie Raskin, who's a U.S. representative from Maryland.
Okay.
Great being.
And is Jewish. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
My father and mother-in-law.
Okay. Your father and mother-in-law were Jewish and great Americans. Okay. Anybody else? Somebody that comes to mind?
I think it's Jimmy Carter. He's
Okay.
a Christian, but he's not a nationalist.
All right, that's exactly right. He's not at all. And he was one of those people that really tried, I think, to live his faith. And people didn't understand that quite, did they? And, okay. Anybody else that comes to your mind? Randall?
Ilhan Omar.
I didn't hear.
Ilhan Omar.
Who's that?
Muslim?
Muslim.
Okay. All right.
Muhammad Ali.
Muhammad Ali. He was a great American, not a Christian. Anybody else? Come to mind.
Joe Lieberman.
Bill Lieberman?
Joe Lieberman.
Joe Lieberman. Right, he was Jewish, he was actually a conservative Jew. If you heard him talk at John McCain's funeral, he talked about how on the Sabbath he doesn't ride a car, and he would make John McCain and his friends walk with him. And they did. And yeah, Joe Lieberman, he is a good. And so these people, so it's right there before our eyes, and we know that there are plenty of people who are good Americans who are not Christians. And so all we have to do is look at our history books and look at people who have served our country really even a long time ago. There were people that were not necessarily Christian that were very good Americans. Okay, so what do you think is the value of having a diverse and inclusive society that respects people who follow various religions or who follow no religion? So what is the value of having a diverse and inclusive society? Anybody? Knowledge. All right.
Experience.
Experience.
Different perspectives.
See a different perspective, right? We realize we see the world one way and not everybody sees the world the way that we do. Okay?
Better food. I mean, not that I don't like the meatloaf and all that, but Indian food, yum.
Well, you know, when the shooting happened in the mosque, where was that? And anyway, we had a vigil at the mosque here, and everybody talked about the food. It was just the best thing. So, but to realize that there are really wonderful people in it, the diversity makes our country richer, and it just does so much for our country in many ways, right?
Well, this is just a real quick story. I work with 3 Hindu women, and one year we were all in charge of the holiday committee. So of course we bring the Christmas tree out and everything. Nobody wanted to volunteer. Nobody. In our department, it was mainly 95% Christian. Who wanted to celebrate Christmas, not holiday? But the Hindu women, they came to me. her name was Ripple. She's like, Ray, we've got to come out. It's Christmas time. Let's get the Christmas trees out. And I even said, what holidays can we help you with? She's like, oh, don't worry about that. Let's get your Christmas tree up. Let's get your nativity out. And I just was like, wow.
Yeah.
So that's a good example.
Yeah, it is. I was telling somebody, and I don't know who it was in here, but one year at Christmas, when we lived in California, our church was having a Christmas music thing on a Sunday night. And I looked up, and a friend of mine, who is Jewish, was sitting there. And I went over and I said, Sue Ellen, what are you doing here? And she said, I just got hungry for Christmas music, so I just thought I'd come tonight. Okay, that's fine. She wasn't interested in converting. She just loves Christmas music, and she decided to come. And so for a lot of people, if they've especially grown up in this country, that's all they know is celebrating Christmas, and unfortunately. Okay, Julie.
Well, a number of the songs were not written by Christians, but by Jewish people and other white Christmas.
Oh, you're talking about Christmas songs?
Christmas songs.
Yeah.
Written by other religions.
Yeah. True. Okay, we're gonna watch video clip 3, I think, is that the one we're on, 1037? You need this?
Your mouse isn't on the arrow.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Well, in our work, when we survey large portions of the population, we ask usually 5 or 6 questions of our respondents. Things that ask them to strongly disagree, to strongly agree with statements like the federal government should advocate Christian values. The federal government should declare the United States a Christian nation. That we should allow prayer in public schools, or that the United States, the success of the United States, is part of God's plan. And so depending on how Americans answer those questions, how strongly they agree or disagree with those questions, we're able to assign point values and combine them into a scale. And this scale gives us an idea and understanding how strongly they embrace Christian nationalism or not. And so if we move to the next slide, what you can see is that Americans are distributed all across this scale. From at the lowest end with the white bars, these are Americans who strongly disagree, or at least disagree with any of those questions, to those at the highest end, the red bars, who are agreeing, or in most cases strongly agreeing with all of those questions about whether Christianity should be privileged in the public sphere. And you can see below, or on the next slide, that we assign labels to each of these groups, or I hope you can see. To the left are rejectors, and so they're about 22% of the population, the white part. So these are Americans who completely repudiate any notion of a close relationship between Christianity and American civil society. Resistors are the blue bar, and they're about 27% of the population. They're uncomfortable with the idea of a Christian nation, but they're more undecided than our rejectors. So they are not wholly opposed, we would say, but they definitely lean toward opposition. And in the gray bar, about 32% of the population, this is the largest of the 4 different orientations towards Christian nationalism, we have accommodators. Now, accommodators are in some sense a mirror image of resistors. So they lean towards accepting the Christian nation narrative, this cultural framework. They're friendly towards it. So their support is undeniable, but it isn't comprehensive. And finally, we have what we call ambassadors, the red bar there on the right. And they are just under 20% of the population, a fifth of Americans in the US. And they are wholly supportive of Christian nationalism as a framework. So believing that the US either was or still is, or at least at the very least should be, a distinctly Christian nation in order to flourish. And again, the Christian brings with it a host of different cultural assumptions. Now, one common question that we have or are asked is Christian nationalism confined to one particular social or demographic group or even religious tradition? So over the next 4 slides, what I'd like to do is answer this.
We're going to end up seeing all of this webinar, I mean, throughout the 3 lessons, but we're taking pieces of it that pertain to different topics about Christian nationalism. One thing I wanted to say is, if you look historically at countries that have a national church, you will find that the churches are not well attended, they are not robust. It is people, my sister lived in Germany for a whole long time, and she said people go to get their babies baptized, and I guess maybe get married or whatever, but that's about it. And it's not like many churches here where we grew up going every time the doors are open, and the church is a big part of our life. So I think we should be able to take a lesson from some of those countries, but apparently it's hard for us to do that. Okay, so he gave it, yes.
I just want to follow up on what you were saying. Lived in Europe for 15 years. Part of the reason for that, if you ever want to know about separation of church and state, the state requires you to declare a religion or no religion. And if you declare a religion, you are required to pay taxes on that religion, and the money goes to, if you declare Jewish, then the money goes to Jewish churches. What's happened since this happened in the 1930s in Europe, what's happened is that Europe has become secular. Because everybody said, for tax reasons, I'm not declaring a religion, so I don't have to pay taxes on it. And you're absolutely right. The only time they go to church is for a wedding, a funeral, or baptism of the babies. But if you do a baptism of the babies, then you've declared your religion, and you have to pay taxes on it. So.
Get in a tight. I had this conversation when we were in Scotland, because they have a national church, which is the Presbyterian Church. And so I had a conversation with a person from Scotland, and we were talking about it, and he said that is exactly true. The church is not thriving in Scotland because of that it is a national church. And so you would think that we would pay attention to that, but that's not always the case. Okay, so Dr. Whitehead, you saw those 4 categories of people in our country that they hold. And the rejectors, these individuals strongly resist the privileging of Christian religion by government authorities. So they strongly oppose Christian nationalism. That's 21%. The resistors, they don't like it. They don't really want the government endorsing or advocating for like Christian faith, but they are a little more comfortable with some display of religious symbols. So they kind of want their cake and eat it too. You know, so that's 26%. The accommodators generally endorse the favoring of the Christian religion or values by governing authorities, and they often hold that America was founded as a Christian nation. And then that's 32%, and the ambassadors strongly support Christian nationalism. So I think it would be important to read over those and to think about where you put yourself in that lineup of groups of people in terms of Christian nationalism. So according to this research, Christian nationalism is widespread. Nearly 52% of the U.S. population are accommodators or ambassadors. So 52% would be slightly more than half, right? Have you ever interacted with individuals that you could clearly put in one of those categories? Judge, you're nodding, you can tell us.
I have a very good friend of mine I've known for 35, 40 years who's, he is a national, he's Republican, and he believes that Christianity was started by our forefathers, and that's what we need to be.
Okay.
That's where he is. I love him, but we disagree.
Disagree, okay. Anybody else? John?
What comes to mind is that when we've marched, the Pride Parade, there will be the agitators and the protesters that we were told, don't take the bait, do not engage, just keep them.
Right. Yeah.
But that's as far as personally engaging with someone one-on-one, no, unfortunately we haven't. But that's probably the closest.
Yeah.
They're out there.
They're out there. They're definitely out there. And you know, when you think about people that say this nation was created to be a Christian nation, You remember back, it's been some time ago now, but in a sermon I talked about that we have a God box and we put God in that box and we don't let God be God. It's like, here you are, God, this is who you are and this is all you can do. I feel that way too when we talk about was created to be a Christian nation, that's who we are. And it's like, we don't let God show us new and different ways to be. You know, it's like, God, this is how you have to be. You've got to be one of these four, right? And we're going to tell you which one you are. And so anyway, something to think about. So like I said, yes, I'm sorry.
But I also find it very interesting, like in the United States alone, depending on where you live and what part of the country, I've noticed that the nationalism can be different in different areas. Like the South, most people call it the Bible Belt,
Right.
things like that. And then you got them up here in the North, they're not so much. You know, they're more Catholic, more, you know, things. I can find that very interesting in different parts of our country, different groups, can be one of those four categories, in other words.
Yeah.
I can find that kind of interesting when I think about it.
Yeah, that's true. You're right. Yes. Keith?
I noticed that the data set was from 2017. Those are pre-pandemic numbers and pre-Trump numbers, who has a tendency to make things polarizing. I bet we have a lot more accommodators and ambassadors than we did before.
I think that's a good observation. It's certainly possible. It'd be interesting to know if they've redone their research in any way to see if there's a change. We saw, and they're going to talk about this in part of the lesson, so I don't want to get ahead of it, but January 6th was a very vivid example to us of people in the Capitol, you know, with weapons and praying and saying about, you know, breaking in and wanting to hurt people, but yet talking about praying and Jesus is with us and God's with us and telling us what to do. And it's like, something wrong with that picture, right? And so, yes, it would be very interesting to know. Anybody else? Something you want to say about that? Julie?
Just something that I've noticed before I go down to the Sundance Square.
Mm-hmm.
You have your guy there that has a megaphone and
Oh, yeah. Yeah, when we went to march, what were we marching for? The women's march, and the guy was telling us we should be at home and cooking and cleaning and, yeah, waiting for them to come home. So anyway, I'll just drop that one right there. Okay, so,
Tim's
oh, I'm sorry, who's?
Tim.
Oh, Tim.
Doesn't the Bible say a lot about that? God's with us, let's go defeat the, you know, I mean, it has a lot of, God is with us and he's wanting us to go defeat.
To go defeat people?
Yeah, like in the Old Testament, there's a lot of.
Yeah, in the Old Testament, I think there is more of that, but then when Jesus came, you know, it's like we see a lot of, you should reach out to the marginalized and the, you know, people who don't know justice, you know, aren't being given justice and those kind of things. So, and I think even in the Old Testament, some of that, those were holy battles. And so we're going to talk a little bit about Scripture in a bit. And so let's reserve that and talk about that some more when we get to that. Becky.
I just wanted to say, going back to this thing about we're a Christian, we were founded as a Christian nation or something. When I think about that, it's like we are now paying back the Native American community for how we took over this country, supposedly, or how the forefathers came and in such a Christian way pushed everybody off the land and ripped them off and, you know, took advantage of the culture that was already here. And so how is that Christian behavior? In other words, that word Christian, here we go again with the definition of that. Is it, you know, the belief system? Is it a behavior? Is it, you know, for everybody that you talk to, they may have a different definition of Christian and what they believe a Christian nation should be.
They believe they were the new Israelites and that it was their job to push the Native Americans off that land because God wanted them to have that land as the promised land.
Ian justified me.
God wanted them to do it?
Yeah, yeah, because that was.
I like January 6th.
Wow.
Okay, Chuck, what did you say?
Ian justified the means.
That's right. That's right. And a lot of times, what is at the bottom of it?
Fear.
Fear and
Greed.
greed, money. You know, fear, and that's often at the bottom of what we, reasons that we do what we do. And so, okay, so now we're going to move to talking about how we respond as Christians to Christian nationalism. And we'll give the choir just a minute to get up and go. We're going to be done by 7 ourselves. So we're going to talk about some theological statements that may help safeguard us against the troubled ideology of Christian nationalism. And then when we get to lesson 2, we're going to explore further Bible-based, as I said, 10 responses. So we're going to watch clip 4, and how long are those? It's about
4 or
4
5
minutes, yeah, so we have time. Okay, let's watch clips 4 and 5.
Can I jump in with that? Because I think, remember Dr. King said darkness cannot cast out darkness, and we like to do that. Hatred cannot cast out hatred, only love can do that. We must counter these negative perversions of Christianity and of our humanity. We must counter them with an affirmative, positive way of being Christian. One, I do think Christianity must recenter itself on the teachings, the example, and the spirit of Jesus of Nazareth. I just think that is critical, and I mean the New Testament Jesus, the one in the book, right? I'm not playing with cultural ones, not complicated, the one in the book. And I think I think this is work of positive, affirmative evangelism that grounds itself on Jesus of Nazareth and his teaching. That's one. I think the second thing is, I think we do have to call on affirmatively our common humanity, that we are all children of God, made in God's image and likeness. And that means we're brothers, sisters, we are related to each other. And then thirdly, I think we have to rebuild, and this is where it gets practical. We have to rebuild relationships between people across difference of politics, across difference of race, across difference of religion, and we have to do it intentionally. I've been inviting Episcopalians, and they've been here, and I say, from many one, we must become e pluribus unum, and we must reach out to people who are different than we are to cultivate at least relationships across difference. And we have to do that affirmatively and intentionally and across. That's one very practical thing. Everybody who knows somebody who's different than they are, get to know them. Spend some time with them. Let that become a personal value for your life. And then maybe we can begin to chip away. Everybody won't get on board, but somebody will.
Professor Whitehead?
Yeah, I think that.
Okay, that was.
That's one, then the next one.
Okay, I think it may be under.
Well, in our work, when we survey large portions of.
I think it's number 2. Yeah. Okay, and just the. Where's the full screen?
Green button at the top.
Okay, I'm not sure this is.
In the last 4 years, and perhaps even a little bit before that, a rise in anti-Muslim bigotry and anti-Semitism. And we've seen horrific, particularly in Pittsburgh at the Tree of Life Synagogue, the largest single massacre of Jewish people in the United States. And also with our colleagues in Islamic Muslim colleagues, that they're facing vandalism and persecution. And one of the tenets of Christian nationalism is you have to be Christian in order to be an American. And on their own website, they say that Islam is a perversion of the Judeo-Christian message and that it is a threat to the United States. That's a very short step to taking, torching synagogues and mosques and murdering people. So we can't forget. And for my, here's for my Lutheran folks here, take a look at Luther's Small Catechism again. Very clear. There's God and God alone, and you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. And anytime we cross over that line, that's when it gets to be extremely dangerous.
Okay. Do you want to?
We're not, oh, is there one more?
Well, this is part of lesson 2. So, do you want another we can do?
No,
that?
not really. We're
Okay.
gonna stop right there.
Okay.
Okay, so I just wanted to say, the first person was Bishop Curry. He is the Bishop of the Episcopal Church, and he's the author of the book we studied in together last year. And the woman is the Bishop of the Lutheran Church. And they're very clear about what we were just saying in Go Tim about our call as Christians and what we're supposed to do, and reflect on how we need to get to know people and reach out to them and accept them, and no matter who they are. And I would say, as hard as it is on both sides, to listen to people that we totally disagree with, but also to listen to people who have a different opinion maybe than we do. So I think we're going to stop there for tonight because it is 7 o'clock.
Just real quick, just here in Bishop Curry, it made me think of the Book of Joy with the Dalai Lama
Right.
and Desmond Tutu.
Yeah.
And how different their religions are, but how they interacted with each other when we went through that book.
Absolutely,
And really
absolutely.
How two very different religions can come together.
Can come together.
And can share the love that those two guys share.
Yeah, it is certainly possible to build a bridge and to with people that we believe differently from. It's possible, but it takes work, takes time, and so think about in the next week where you are on that resistor, accommodator. Where are you in terms of Christian nationalism? What is your thought about it, and about what position you take on that? I have a feeling many of us are close to each other in what we think, and if any group could understand this, it's our church. Sunday I talked about the man the preacher that was so opposed to the LGBTQ community, was certain that God is going against God's law, and that God, you remember, and he got to know a young lesbian woman who was a person of faith, deep faith, and over the course of a year or so, he changed, and he realized he was wrong. And that wouldn't have happened if that young woman hadn't been willing to engage here, this preacher who was trying to, say how bad she was. And so that's an example to us of if anybody knows what it feels like, our community knows what it feels like, right? And knows that it is painful and divisive and makes you feel left out and all of those things. Yes, somebody had their hand up. Julie.
A friend of mine, Sherry,
Uh-huh.
I went to game night.
Mm-hmm.
And the husband was extreme conservative. Sherry came with us. My friend had told him what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
But it turned out he had a great time.
Oh, okay.
So getting to know people,
Mm-hmm.
and because he had not been introduced before to the differences and stuff in humanity. And he found out that, she's no different.
Yeah. She was saying that a friend was very anti LGBTQ, but went with somebody and got to know them and talked to them and had a great time. And it was, it didn't really matter to their enjoyment of the evening. Any last words before we say a prayer? Okay, there's a lot of stuff here. I appreciate your engaging the topic, and so let's keep doing that and just paying attention to what's happening around us. That's a big part of it. And let's pray together. God, we give you thanks. We give you thanks for minds with which we can think, hearts with which we can feel. And we pray that you would help us to use them, to think, be discerning, and to be open to doing things a different way, to knowing people that we might not ordinarily take time to know. We pray that you would be with us in this endeavor. We give you thanks for this night, and we pray that you'll go with us, and that we will come again on Sunday to worship together. Amen. Don't forget, tomorrow is Texas Giving Day.